I'm Dr. Samuel Acuff, research scientist at the Recovery Research Institute in the Department of Psychiatry at Massachusetts General Hospital. I'm here with Dr. John Kelly, the founder and director of the Recovery Research Institute and a professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. How's it going, Dr. Kelly?
Good. Nice to see you.
Yeah. I want to talk to you a little bit about the Recovery Research Institute. So what is the Recovery Research Institute?
The Recovery Research Institute is a center housed within the Department of Psychiatry of the Massachusetts General Hospital, under the auspices actually of the Center for Addiction Medicine. And its main central focus and mission is really on recovery science. So not just looking at there's been, as you know, there's been a lot of research on acute care stabilization and short-term treatment. But when we founded it in 2012, I think there was kind of a recognition back then that we needed to know a lot more about how people establish sustained remission and stable remission, and how they got into long-term recovery. And there was a big gap in the evidence base of what we know. So that was really the prime focus, and has been its mission since started, was really to help people understand more about recovery science, how people achieve that, how people do that, what does that phenomenon look like. So that's been its primary mission, has been dedicated to research, conducting novel research, but also disseminating existing research. Two other pieces of it beyond research are training and education. So like many institutes and centers around the world, we focus on training new investigators, new scientists who want to learn how to do this kind of research, as well as education, so broader education to the different stakeholders, clinicians, policymakers, federal government, people around the country who can benefit from knowledge about addiction and recovery from it.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the founding and sort of the science and the research zeitgeist when this was founded. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that. What was it like, and how was it founded?
Yeah, well, it was back in about probably 2010, 2011. I myself had focused a lot on kind of, I guess, implicitly in recovery processes myself, from the early stages of my career. I was interested very much as a young clinician and researcher, not only on how we can help people make those initial changes, but how do we sustain those changes after treatment? We spend a lot of money on stabilization and acute care, medically supervised treatment, but I've always felt there was not enough attention paid to those next stages. So what happens when people leave that initial acute care setting, detoxification, stabilization, or those first month or 2 or 3 of treatment that they might receive in a treatment facility? We know that the risk of relapse and reinstatement and recurrence of the disorder lasts for many years, even after initial stabilization. So the question then is, how do we link people with resources that can help initiate and sustain remission across time? And this is really the essence of recovery research and recovery science. So there was that there was that zeitgeist, as you mentioned that word. At the time, I think, there was an increased recognition of that deficit in knowledge. I was very influenced by a guy called William White, who was a researcher in this space and was really an architect of a lot of the language and concepts that we use today. So I really piggybacked onto him really in terms of his knowledge, and I had the privilege of being able to work with Bill a little bit and collaborate with him. So I learned a lot from Bill. And then when I had the opportunity through some people in the community that I had known for quite a while through my work, they wanted to see kind of more recovery science being conducted and disseminated. So I was able to get a very small donation, which really sparked the ability for us to found the new institute.
Yeah, and sort of expand what was already being done, it sounds like, into something a little
formalize it. Yeah, I think it made it more formal. And I think what was really very positive was that Massachusetts General Hospital Department of Psychiatry and the leadership in the hospital were very much behind it.
Yeah.
And I think that was really a very positive move and a lot of foresight on their part, recognizing the importance of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, could you tell me a little bit about the types of research that the Recovery Research Institute does, but also the other initiatives that are housed within it?
Yeah, so we conduct a lot of different kinds of studies looking at recovery processes. So a lot of them are naturalistic studies to find out, how people fare after treatment, or for people who don't use treatment, which we know are very many people who have a substance use disorder don't actually engage with any formal services, but find a different pathway outside of that context to recover. So we do longitudinal prospective studies, understanding those processes of change, what people utilize to help them recover and stay in remission across time, understanding the mechanisms by which people change and the kinds of mobilizers that mobilize change. So we do a lot of studies like that. We've also done the first national recovery study, which is estimated for the first time the national recovery prevalence of people who formerly had an alcohol or other drug problem, but are now in recovery from that condition. So we've estimated national prevalence there with a nationally representative study. We recognize now that about 10% of the US population has successfully resolved a significant drug or alcohol problem. So that's about 25 million people. We're actually surrounded by people who have resolved a problem, who are in recovery. We just don't know it. So that has been, I think, significant. As well as treatment development studies. So we look at kind of more on the acute care side as well at the beginning end of the recovery process. So designing, developing, testing treatments, new treatments for youth and adults.
Excellent set of research being done there. Wondering if you could give an example of, it's been about a little over a decade. How has the research and the initiatives that take place at the Recovery Research Institute impacted the recovery community?
I think one thing that it's done for the recovery community writ large is that it's really validated their own experience. I think that's one of the important things. It's legitimized this notion of recovery and the phenomenology of recovery for the millions of people, for this 25 million people, as I mentioned, who, as we know, these conditions are highly stigmatized. The individuals who suffer from them and their families are highly stigmatized. So to have a Recovery Research Institute, which is really focusing on them and their experience, has really, for the first time, I think, legitimized them. The fact that this institute is housed under the auspices of the top psychiatric department in the country, as well as, ostensibly the best medical school in the world, Harvard Medical School, is very significant also, because that backdrop and that brand, again, emphasizes and legitimizes this focus. So I think that, number one, has really helped those individuals feel empowered. Number one, and I think another fact is that the research that we've done has also validated their experience. So a lot of the research we do is really confirming what they've already known, for these tens of millions of people have already known. But to actually have that legitimized through science has been very validating for them.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the stigma often prevents people who maybe need this information from being willing to understand it. And so having it in a research article, right, and then disseminating it to the proper audiences, it can help.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Exactly, yeah.
Well, if someone was interested in learning more about the Recovery Research Institute, where could they go?
Well, we have a website, recoveryanswers.org. Recoveryanswers.org. That's our Recovery Research Institute website. That is a very, I think, a rich, a deep website in terms of its content. It covers everything about addiction and recovery from it. The etiology of addiction, epidemiology, the typologies of different types of phenotypes and genotypes associated with addiction and the manifestation of substance use disorders. It also talks about, has a lot of content about different types of treatment, from harm reduction through screening and brief intervention, through treatment, residential, different levels of care, up through long-term recovery. And it has many different other elements, more specialized elements of different populations for young people, adolescents and emerging adults, for example, as well as information about different minoritized groups, racial, ethnic minorities, as well as sexual minorities, veterans, other special populations that are very important and underserved typically.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It seems like an incredible resource, and thanks for sharing about it.
Thank you for asking.